Predators year in review report cards continue today with another big one. Filip Forsberg. Injury kind of derailed his season, but up until that point, was he meeting expectations? Plus, we'll also take a deep dive at Yakov Trenin's season today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast coming to you wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. It is playoff time, and before we dive into report cards, what was the Kraken-Dallas game that we saw last night? Still trying to figure that one out.
Here's what I am learning about the Seattle Kraken. They tend to play later games, of course. So
Right.
I have to take my sleep gummy at a different time now because of the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah.
Because I get too tired to finish watching the game. And we cannot not watch every second of a Seattle Kraken game this postseason. That game was insane. It was absolute craziness from top to bottom.
It was, first off, I only saw the first period because your boy needs to sleep and wake up at a decent time to get to work. But even that first period was like, wow, this is quite something.
Yeah, like goal. Like, what is going on? And I want to give a shout out to, and I'm not huge on the Dallas Stars, but I want to give a shout out to Joe Pavelski, 857-year-old hockey Methuselah, Joe Pavelski, 4 goals. He scored all of Dallas's goals. And he was a game time decision. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
His first game back from that massive Matthew Dumba hit, which was game 1? Was it game 1 or game 2? It was like one of the first couple games.
A long time ago.
Away. Yeah. That's quite a way to announce your return to the lineup right there.
Yeah, I loved it. But Seattle, like, nobody has told Seattle that they should just be happy to be here. Like, nobody has told the Kraken, like, oh, this is the season where you just are happy that you made it. They're not remotely interested in not being competitive. I don't think they give one rat's behind about what anybody thinks about their chances. This team is fascinating to me to watch. Fascinating.
Yeah. We also had Panthers Maple Leafs right before that, with the Panthers getting on the board first. I don't think a lot of people predicted that coming, but maybe the Panthers are the team of destiny this year.
Maybe. Okay. Do the Maple Leafs are they just happy they made it to the second round if they can't overcome the Florida Panthers, or is it going to be a huge disappointment?
I mean, I'm sure they're happy to finally get that to the first round. I don't know. I feel like this is the way the playoffs are shaking out. This is destined for Toronto to make a run.
Yeah.
So I would say you would look at it as a big missed opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that series pans out.
Yeah. You know what series we're not watching, Ann?
What series are we not?
Any playoff series involving the Nashville Predators, because there are none. The Nashville Predators missed the playoffs this year. So we're in off-season mode, and we are looking back at some of the top players for the Predators this year with off-season report cards. What went well, what didn't, what needs to change, what their future looks like, and a good old letter grade. And we have Filip Forsberg today, and a interesting season for Filip Forsberg. Of course, last season finally took that big breakthrough that we had kind of been speaking about for, what seemed like 4 or 5 years at that point.
Yeah.
When was Filip Forsberg going to take that big next step? He finally did that. Injuries derailed him this year, 42 points in 50 games. It is a debate as to, whether that sort of met expectations up until that point. So I'll ask you, Anne, let's start off like we do a game recap.
Okay.
What is your one word to describe Filip Forsberg's season?
So my one word to describe Filip Forsberg's season is middle child syndrome. Because this was a season in which I think he really suffered from middle child syndrome. And that's the theory that birth order is important and that the middle child doesn't get as much attention because they aren't the oldest and they aren't the youngest. And I feel like that's a little bit Forsberg's season. He wasn't the veteran with the best season, of course, and then his injury kept him out down the stretch. He also didn't get as much attention as these young players that became such a big storyline down the stretch. So for me, it almost, for as good as Filip Forsberg is, for as critical as he is to the Nashville Predators, the season felt very middle child syndrome to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like who's the oldest child and who's like the youngest child?
UC Saros is the oldest child, I think. I think he's like the veteran where everybody's like, ooh, he's so shiny. And, he was fantastic. And Yossi a little bit, but Yossi with injury. So for me, Saros is the oldest child. The youngest child, I think, is Tommy Novak. Or maybe Luke Evangelista, these young, shiny, like spunky, fun, Luke Evangelista is probably like more your typical youngest child because he's like spunky and like.
He's got the hair.
He's got the hair and
flow.
Yeah. He definitely, I feel that. I'm the youngest child, so I feel Evangelista-y vibes from him. Yeah.
Okay, see, I'm the oldest child.
Are you?
Yeah.
Does birth, is it true in your family, the birth order thing about oldest and youngest?
I don't know because my 2 younger sisters are twins. So
that monkey.
I don't know. They're kind of tied for who gets middle. I mean, one of them's I think older by like 8 minutes, but that's about it.
Hardly counts.
Yeah, I don't think that counts.
Yeah.
One word for me and to describe Filip Forsberg's season is revert. Because it seems like we kind of reverted back to the Filip Forsberg of the of the previous 4 seasons before last season, where it was good. You don't look and say Filip Forsberg had a bad season, but it was one of those that, you watched him play, you look at some of the numbers, 19 goals, 23 assists in 50 games. Even that pace is way off from where he was last season. And it's just one of those situations where you watch him play and you go, I want more. Like, I feel like I need more from Filip Forsberg. Remember, it was like, 2017, 2018, where, he had, I think it was like 64 points in 67 games when he was battling injury. And then, 650 and 60 like the next year. And we're like, okay, but like he's ready to break through. Like he is ready to become that big elite power forward. Like you feel him getting better every year. Like you feel that big jump coming towards being like a legitimate NHL scorer. And it sort of left me, and then for whatever reason, it didn't happen. It happened last year, but then it seems like we're back towards. Yeah. I feel like there's more in the tank. And I don't know if that hinges on just the fact that the Nashville Predators offensively weren't that good this year, and maybe Forsberg's numbers suffered a little bit. But I go back and watch his game, and I go back and look at some of the analytics, and it's just like it feels like you can't help but feel like we should be getting more from Filip Forsberg at this point.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. Not that he has had a bad season, but there's a next level. There's a next level, and it's just waiting for that next level consistently. So I completely pick up what you're putting down with Filip Forsberg this season. Not horrible, but waiting for a little more.
Yeah. So we'll get into a couple of things that went well, a couple of things that didn't, and what his letter grade for the season was. And we'll talk about whether he can survive the injuries and turn things around next season. Plus, also a look at Yakov Trenin, the Yak. We will look at his report card coming up in just a little bit. But first, again, I want to mention today's show brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to stuff is stressful, guys. You have to look at your seats. You don't know like what the view is like, don't necessarily know where your section is. Then you go to check out and there's just like hundreds of dollars in fees. And it just takes all the fun out of going to an event. It shouldn't be that way though. And that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time's the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. They got things like flash deals on last-minute tickets, easy to buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They have images of seat views, so you can like tap the little button and know exactly what your view of the rink or stage or whatever is going to look like, so there's no guesswork there. Plus, lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection. A bunch of protection, so if for some reason your life status change or your plans change, you do not have to worry about giving your $100 tickets away for nothing. And as we mentioned, Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, exclusive flash deals on plenty of stuff, and tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Just 2 taps and you're all set. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, and we're taking a deep dive onto Filip Forsberg's season. What are some things that stood out that he did well?
I think there's a lot of things that Filip Forsberg does well in general, and we saw some of those again this season. I think we've talked about this on the show so many times about needing a finisher, and I think Filip Forsberg is the best finisher that the Nashville Predators have.
Right.
And we saw that in some games. And it's not just that he can finish, it's the way that he generates offense comes from so many different parts of his skill set. He had a hat trick on New Year's Eve against Vegas Golden Knights, and he scored goals in some different ways, and he generated offense in different ways in that game. And so I think there's so much value to having him on the ice for what he creates and what he finishes. Now, we need a little more of that, not just from Forsberg, but from some other people that we're going to get to in some future report cards.
It's a long report card.
Yes, it is. But I really think that he is a versatile player. He is a clutch player. He is a player who he is the guy that you want to have the puck in those tougher situations. He's very clutch for the Predators. I also think his power play performance is so important to this team. Expected goals for per 60 when it comes to the power play jumps up exponentially when Filip Forsberg is on the ice. And it's not just him scoring, it's that his passing, his reading what's going on the power play opens up opportunities for everybody else on that unit. So those are the things that I really think that we saw again from Filip Forsberg that make his game really special. But we need to see more.
Yeah. And the thing I love too is just that there's not a lot of frustration or quit or anything like that in Filip Forsberg. I can't remember. It was the game before the famous locker room closed door players meeting, that sort of thing. And I can't. Maybe it might have been St. Louis. It was just a really bad Predators game. And you could see just the Predators players look sluggish. They were dragging their feet. Kind of giving up on pucks, like throwing in the towel. And then you had Filip Forsberg, who looked like he was single-handedly trying to win the game for his team. Just going out there, throwing his body around, shouting at teammates left and right, going out there, forechecking, chasing the puck, driving to the net. That's what I love about Filip Forsberg is you always see the energy he brings, regardless of what the scoreboard is. There's no quit in Filip Forsberg. You mentioned the hat trick he had against the Vegas Golden Knights. Remember, that was a big comeback. And his hat trick was the goal with, I think it was like 8 seconds left on the clock or something like that.
Yeah.
That finally capped that comeback. Predators lost in overtime, but the comeback was nice.
It was
To
great.
get to that point was great. So that's what I love about Filip Forsberg, that kind of contagious, energy that goes around.
Yeah, I really like that about his game. And that is something that is consistent about Forsberg. You don't ever see him take a shift off. He's always doing what he needs to do. There were, it's hard to evaluate a player this season who had the season that Forsberg did last season, because we're still trying to figure out which is the anomaly. Was last season who Filip Forsberg is, and this season he started slow and then the injury? It just gets a little tricky. So next season is going to be a big one for Filip Forsberg. And there's definitely some areas where I would like to see him improve.
Yeah. The biggest thing to me, Anne, is just at what point do you start kind of raising your hand and going, should we be worried about all his injuries?
Yeah.
That's just become the story. I mean, he had 32 missed games this year, 13 last year. He missed around 10, 15 during that the late start year.
Yeah.
Played, missed about 20 in 2019, about 10, 15 in 2018. I'm just looking at numbers and doing raw math in my head, so I don't know the exact number.
There's a pattern to it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he played 3 consecutive 82-game seasons between 2015 and 2017, and then the injury bug started creeping in, and that's a little bit of a concern. And the biggest concern to me is, and please don't take this as speculating. This is just kind of the observation.
Mm-hmm.
But after the upper body injury, which I think all of us are probably assuming it was some kind of concussion,
it was
the fact that he kept coming close to coming back. He was traveling with the team, he was skating during in a non-contact jersey, and then all of a sudden you hear oh, he's going to need more time. He's back off the road. That's a little bit of a concern, right?
It is. And concussions are such a tricky injury. It's not, it's not a linear recovery, perhaps like a broken bone or surgery in a recovery kind of thing. And I think, looking back at the injury when it happened, I think we all knew immediately this was significant. I mean, Mark Borowiecki's injury was, of course, more frightening, but this one, this hit in how Filip Forsberg was on the ice afterward, it was such a red flag. And, he talked about it in the locker room cleanout, just how frustrating it was to feel like there are areas where I'm close and then I push a little bit to see if I'm there and I'm not there. Yeah. And it does become a concern, because here's what's real about concussions. They are cumulative.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think everybody, just not putting anything out there, not speaking anything over him, but in the back of your mind, you do kind of have this thing about, is he going to get back to 100%? I don't know. Concussions are tricky. They're awful and tricky.
So let's say he is back next year.
Mm-hmm.
We know the Predators had some young guys brought up. He, I think, was injured before all the trades started happening too. Yeah. So he really didn't get a chance to play in this new look Preds lineup. Who do you have him with next year?
Gosh, I spent so much time looking at that very question, and I'm coming up with, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, Matt Duchene, just because I feel like there's some chemistry there, and you go back to Cody Glass. Do you have is Tommy Novak ready to be your everyday number one center? Is there somebody else you try to make a play for?
Yeah. Because I agree with you. I think there's something with Forsberg and Duchene. And I think Glass, Forsberg, and Duchene, we saw some really good things from that group. But again, it's what are we going to see from players like Tommy Novak and Cody Glass next season? We saw some really great things this season. What are we going to be able to see consistently next season? Because you have to have somebody with Forsberg and Duchene, if they're together. You've got to have your best guy facilitating those two. Those are going to be your offensive weapons, unless they bring in somebody different.
Yeah. I will say, if you're willing to maybe move Evangelista to the other wing and maybe split up Forsberg and Duchesne, boy, doesn't Phil Tomasino on Phil Forsberg's line sound tantalizing?
He
Just that level of
Yes.
setup with that finisher.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is intriguing. We need to do a whole, like, here's how we would do the lines episode.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to figure out who's on the team first. That's step one.
There's always a hitch in the giddy up.
And if I had to give Forsberg a letter grade, I'd say a solid B+ for this season.
Yeah, I would agree. This is a hard one to grade because of the injury, because of, just a little bit of inconsistency. But I think we know what this team has in Forsberg. I would agree with you. He's a B season for me.
Yeah. So there is our report card of Filip Forsberg. Let's get to another player, and let's close things out with Yakov Trenin. This is a guy who is somebody else that kind of had an up and down year. 17 goals last year. I think people were kind of anxious to maybe see what he did for a follow-up. Still a decent season for his role. 12 goals, 12 assists in 24 points. That equals his point total from last season in 3 fewer games. And he also set a career high in assists. So there we go. We got the makings of another young playmaker. And what do you make of Yakov Trenin's season? What's your one word to describe Yakov Trenin's year?
My one word is the Kool-Aid man, because you just have a wall, and then all of a sudden this big Kool-Aid man busts through and is this huge presence. And for me, that's a little bit Yakov Trenin in a couple of areas. Obviously, he's no Filip Forsberg, but there is something about his presence in certain roles with the Nashville Predators that make a statement like the Kool-Aid man busting through the wall. Oh, yeah. Like that's, that to me is Yakov Trenin. For me, I think as a penalty killer, he is exceptional.
Yeah, underrated part of his game. I agree.
Yeah. The other thing is our family started referring to him this season as Houdini, because even though he is a giant man who skates a little bit like a dancing bear, there is some way that he can be involved in a play at one end of the ice and suddenly appear at the other end of the ice and be involved really quickly in that play. And so I think he just sort of appears in pockets of the game that make an impact for me. What is your one word to describe Trenin?
I'm going to steal a word that I used to describe him in an article a few years ago, and I'm going to go Jello mold.
I'm going to need more.
Here's the thing. Like, when you go to Thanksgiving dinner and there's like the big like Jello mold there, it's like jiggly. There may be some berries floating in there or something else. And you're just looking at it, it's like, how am I supposed to eat this? Like, how am I supposed to ingest this? Like, is it a dessert? Am I supposed to like take a little slice of it and kind of serve it like cranberry sauce? Am I just supposed to like pick little chunks of it? Like, what is this? I mean, it looks fine. It looks intriguing, but what is this? That's kind of what I look at when I look at Yakov Trenin as a player, where it's just like, I don't quite know like what role he fits best in, or like what his like long-term ceiling was. Like, if you looked at him from moments last year where he scored that 17 goals on just 12% shooting, which is pretty good. I started thinking, it's like, okay, could he like be different players here, but develop into like a Val Nichushkin kind of guy, where he is just, this big bruising winger. Tom Wilson is another kind of good example. This big bruising guy who's, out there with more skilled guys, but is holding his own and is just kind of the guy that adds a different dimension out there to clean up and get some dirty goals.
Yeah.
At times I look at that, and then, at other times I look at it, it's like, okay, well, maybe his ceiling is, fourth line or third line. And he does a lot of that really well. Like, he goes out there and kills penalties very well. like a very good forechecker, although it did make a little bit not the same impact in terms of changing the game, with neutral zone play and stuff as he did last year. But yeah, I mean, I just look at Yakov Trenin, I'm like, what is he?
What is he? Well, and it's interesting is when you frame it like that, because there are aspects of his game where you're like, oh, I could see him in this particular role, but yet there are other parts where you're not, like, with the right people, there could be something really amazing happening, but I don't know that we found that yet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he's 26 years old, so
old as dirt in hockey years.
No, not old as dirt, but it's like at that stage where it's like, okay, you're kind of starting to see what he's going to turn into. And I feel like we're still kind of asking our question. It's like, okay, is he, are the Preds still kind of working on him and developing him into maybe something more? Is this kind of just the role they have for him long term? So I don't know. Do you anticipate any major changes in his role next year?
Again, I come back to, it is so hard to say because who is going to be on the team? I would like to see a little bit more from him offensively, as far as like, hey, could Yakov Trenin be a 20-goal scorer consistently? Could he be? I think with the right people, he and Gino and Colton Sissons had a good thing going when, last season they had a good thing going. Gino kind of capitalized more on the goals portion of that line. But I think, what if you had Yakov Trenin, Colton Sissons, and what if you got somebody like Kiefer Sherwood who could up his finishing? Kiefer Sherwood takes some good shots. We need him to finish some of those shots. I thought it was interesting watching him and Colton Sissons and Juuso Parssinen, but I don't think we're going to see that next year. I think Parssinen's going to compete for one of those center roles. I think if you have the right pieces, he's a puzzle piece that could be really important. He's not an edge piece. You know what I'm saying? He's not an edge puzzle piece.
Well, can I add a question into the uncertainty mix?
Please.
Yakov Trenin is an unrestricted free agent after next season.
Yeah.
Is he trade bait?
Oh, he would be like, he is somebody that I think teams would take a look at for kind of that fourth line role. I can see him being an interest. I can see him generating interest in teams that are looking for some more depth. But what do the Predators lose if they give him up? And I go back to, this is a guy who's phenomenal on the penalty kill. Is that enough to keep him here?
Yeah. You're going to have to take a look and be like, okay, is there anybody else, any of these young people we have coming up right now who could do that role? Yeah. But at the same time, if you're building a long-term team, you mentioned there might be a team. We saw what Tampa paid for Tanner Jeannot. I don't know if anybody would give him that much for, Yakov Trenin, but you can certainly make a compelling case that the Preds could get a pretty decent return for a guy like that. So that's going to be interesting to see. And what's a letter grade for Trenin?
For me, I'm going to give Trenin a B, not because I think he's super important, but because of this weird role that he plays. I think he does well, especially, and I go back to just how good he is on the penalty kill. For me, I'm going to give him a B. I feel like if we could find the right fit for him, there's more potential there. I'm just not sure the Predators are going to be able to navigate it, especially with this next season coming up. I don't know. So I'm going to give him a B. Maybe I'm just being nice because I do love Yakov Trenin.
I would give him a B plus.
Okay.
And I would up that grade a little bit just because I think in terms of the role and kind of being a bottom six guy, 24 points, maybe you want more there. Maybe that's the one thing you want to see him kind of take a bigger step is to scoring some more offense. But he's also doing a lot of stuff you ask of him. True. And that bottom six, which is kill penalties, go out there and throw your body around, make hits, make physical plays offensively, not just, check somebody to clear a loose puck or anything like that, but, get into dangerous areas, draw some defenders, attention away from the net, that kind of stuff. And that's something that Yakov Trenin does very well. So in terms of that, it's kind of like Colton Sissons yesterday. You have to grade him based on what, his expectations and what his role are. So yeah, I would give him a solid B plus.
Yeah. I would give him an A on goal celebration. Love when he jumps into the glass.
Yeah.
I would give him an A.
Yeah. A on fighting 6'9" hockey players.
Oh yeah.
A plus on that one.
That's true.
More report cards coming up this week. Tomorrow, Anne, let's say we dive into Matt Duchene, shall we?
All right. It's going to be a tense night in the Kimmel house as I prepare for that.
Yeah. We'll do a Matt Duchene report card tomorrow, so tune in for that. Again, as always, barring any giant Predators breaking news. Also have some fun stuff coming up for you later this summer that we're working on. We hope to give you guys some insight on that soon, so stay tuned because we got lots more to get to this offseason. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com. Follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Also, be sure to follow the podcast at LO_Predators. And however you're listening to us, whether you are making us your first listen of the day on your favorite podcasting platform or watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you always know when we have fresh stuff out for you. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with more report cards and more hockey shenanigans. See you then.